everybody, my name is Tanya and this is my July wrap up. So that sounds a little bit strange to say sitting here on the 24th of October, but I'm trying to work out a way of kind of wrapping up everything that's happened in the period that I've been gone. I've been umming and ahhing about which way to go about this because it's October and I'm talking about books that I read in July, and my recall and my recall through this period has not been really great. So I don't really have an awful lot to say about some of these books, but I thought I'd do a quick run through and show you everything that I did read during that time. The first book I completed in July was Anchor Point by Alice Robertson. I don't have this one here because it was a library book. This is one of the books that was on the long list for the Stella Prize. I made a video a while back about how I was going to try and read the 2015 Stella Prize long list, and that's kind of fallen a little bit flat along with everything else after I started studying. So this is basically the only one that I've read in this intervening time. I am still hoping to get back onto that project again now that I've got a little bit of time to focus. Hopefully I can start reading some of those, although now I've got myself enmeshed in Lord of the Rings, so that'll take a little while to get out of. Or maybe not, we'll see. So, being the longest away book, I don't have a lot to say about this, which is a real shame because I was, wanting to make a bit of a project around these books. This is also one that I read the first chapter of for my try chapter tag on this Stella Prize books, and I'd kind of had a bit of an idea about where this was going in that, and it completely surprised me in the direction that it took. So, as we open, this is following the story of 10-year-old Laura, who lives with her mother and father and younger sister on a farm in the Australian bush, and what happens when Laura's mother disappears. And it goes on from there, and like I said, it took a direction that I wasn't necessarily expecting. I had kind of preconceived thoughts about what that meant, and it surprised me, which was good. What I do remember about this one is that it's got a very strong sense of place, and I think it captured very well the feeling and the tenuousness at times of trying to work the land and make a living from the land and as a farm owner, and what impact that has on their lives. It also follows, the impact of their mother's disappearance and how it places restrictions on what Laura can and can't do, and is very much a study of that, which I found really interesting. It's a little bit more wide-ranging than I expected. It follows quite a long period of time, and I really enjoyed it. Like I said, my recall of it now isn't great, and I think that's a big shame that I wasn't able to wrap this up before things took a complete nosedive. But as a book that I've read from a long list of a prize that's focused on Australian writing, I think it is definitely a book that feels like Australia and feels like it felt familiar to me. The next book I finished was an audiobook, and that was Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. This is part of my reread and my experience in the audiobooks for the first time as narrated by the wonderful Stephen Fry. It was wonderful. I loved it. 5 out of 5 stars. Wonderful reading experience. Not much more to say other than that. It was wonderful. Next up, I think these are the books that I read during the Booktubeathon. I don't have some of these here because, again, they've gone back to the library. The first two are the first 2 volumes of the Sex Criminals graphic novel series, and I didn't really enjoy these all that much at all. I think I gave them both 2 out of 5 stars. The concept behind it was intriguing, and I've heard some good things, but for me, it just... I don't have any problem with the content and the subject matter of it. From everything that I've heard from people, this was, about 2 people who can stop time when they orgasm, and they decide with that power to rob banks, and that sounded like a lot of fun. It didn't actually really turn out like that in reality. Yes, there was a bank robbing element, but the focus of this is on some other things, on like this mysterious police force, and that side of things I didn't really care about. I just wanted a fun story about sex criminals robbing banks, and it wasn't quite that for me. Next up, I read 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. This is something I've been meaning to read for a very, very, very long time. I think I was also meant to watch the movie of this as part of the Booktubeathon challenge it was for, which I didn't. So, there's that. Unfortunately, I don't really have all that much to say about this after this period of time, beyond that I really enjoyed it. This is the story of what happens when something mysterious is discovered on the moon, and humans set out into space to kind of discover what's going on, and it goes from there. I really enjoyed classic sci-fi and things that are told in the vein that this is, so that was a great experience. As I said, probably not all that much after this period of time that I can talk about, but I am really pleased that I finally read this. The next book I completed is this one, which is Take It As a Compliment by Maria Stoyan. This is a graphic novel that I read as part of the Feminist Orchestra book club, although again, I didn't make any contribution to any kind of discussion about it because I am me. This is a graphic novel that has various depictions of real people's stories about sexual assault or abuse that they have suffered, and on the one hand I love this, and on the other I hated it. So I still feel and can remember the feeling this engendered in me. I felt awful reading this, basically, and I mean that's a good thing because that's a sane human reaction to these kinds of stories, but while this is incredibly important and I think very moving, I also hated the experience of reading it because I hated what it was portraying. But that is probably even more reason why more and more people should read this. It made me feel incredibly uncomfortable, it made me feel depressed, and all of the conflicting emotions with this one, but you should definitely read it because I think it is very important. After the reading experience that was Take It As a Compliment, as I said, I was feeling quite uncomfortable, quite depressed, and just awful feeling after that point, so I decided for comfort at that point. And so I read my Animals book, my readathon staple. This one is the 10th book, it's The Android, it's told from the perspective of Marco, and it is what happens when an old friend of his, Eric, is involved in some weird things, and maybe there's a bit more to Eric than we know. I really enjoyed this one for the moral dilemmas that it brings into play, and it, is really quite touching, and it has a bit about, like the uncomplicated joy that is dogs, and just there's a few deeper themes in this one that I found really interesting, and I'm glad going through this and seeing that a lot of it's just wham bam and little episodes of action and then moving on, but there are some deeper points to the Animals as well, which I think is really nice and probably quite important as a children's series to have some element of a learning, I guess, in there as well. Another graphic novel that has since gone back to the library I read is the second volume of Lumberjanes. This is Friendship to the Max. I really quite enjoyed the first volume of this, but I hadn't heard all that great things about the second one, and while I was interested to go on, I kind of ummed and ahed occasionally about whether I would. I'm really glad that I picked up this second volume because I enjoyed it even more than the first one. Can't really remember much of what happened, and it was all nonsensical anyway, so there isn't really a description that I can give, but I found this to be an awful lot of fun. But in Lumberjanes, we're continuing on with our camp of hardcore lady types and the hijinks that they get into, and it's ridiculous and over the top and wonderful, and I really much enjoy it. And then the last book that I completed in the month of July was not for the Booktubeathon, and that is Smoke by Dan Valletta. And I read this one as a buddy read with quite a lot of people, although not all that many of us finished, I don't think, and the feeling wasn't great. I really didn't enjoy this all that much. I think I gave it 2 stars in the end. There were periods that it was quite engaging and sucked me through, and then it just kind of went all downhill, and no, I didn't really enjoy it at all. So this one has been quite heavily marketed as the next His Dark Materials or Harry Potter, which I think is always a risky move when it comes to marketing, in that it's great for initial sales and for boosting the interest in something, but invariably you're not going to live up to it, and so I hadn't really taken all that much stock in that promotion, and I hadn't really built this up as something that was going to be like that, so I don't think it has anything to do with that kind of disappointment. But it just, no, it's not like that at all. So this one is the story of a world where people exude a smoke, and that smoke is linked to sin, and the more privileged classes are kind of taught to control their smoke, whereas the poor are living in their filth as such, which is a really interesting premise, but I don't think it really got there, and I have no interest in continuing on with this series. When it does continue, I am intrigued, I guess, for some answers, but I don't care enough to put myself through more of this because So those were the books that I was able to complete in the month of July. It feels like a very, very long time ago now, because it was. And I will see you soon to wrap up what I read in August. As always, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.